Welcome to the ThunderCast, your martial athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and KD Hugnall. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here. The ThunderCast is on the loose. Thanks for downloading another episode of the ThunderCast. You can follow us on Twitter at ThunderCast_pod and listen to the show anywhere you like to listen to your favorite audio podcasts. And of course, you can always watch us on the ThunderCast YouTube channel. And yeah, you heard in the intro, your hosts Russ Livingood and KD Hugnall, but for the first time on a ThunderCast episode, we're bringing in Jed Horton, our third man in the group, to talk about a rather large issue that just came down the pipeline over the last couple of days. And it's big news. It sent shockwaves through the herd fan base. A lot of people, there was smoke, and we wondered, would there be fire? And sure enough, there was fire. And we're going to get into all of it. But before all of that, we have to get a word from our sponsors at Leasure Oliver PLLC.
If you've been hurt in a wreck, call the law firm of Leasure Oliver PLLC. Find them at 304carwreck.com.
Guys, it's a weird way to start our first episode together on such a big issue, but this calls for opinions from all three of us as we chime in on this. Just the other day, Board of Governors held a special meeting to vote on, amongst who knows what else, the discontinuation of the Marshall Women's Swim and Dive program. It was news that was floating around a couple days or so before this meeting was scheduled and happened, and it sent shockwaves through the fan base. And at the conclusion of the meeting, they went into executive session, so everything was kind of private. You couldn't watch the live stream and see what was said and how it was voted upon. But the conclusion of the meeting, it was indeed passed. The resolution was passed that herd swim and dive would be discontinued at the end of this season, which is awkward in and of itself, because as we are talking right now, the swim and dive program is in conference championships with the American Conference. So that talks about issues with timing. It talks about the issue at large. And we're going to get some reaction from you guys. But I should say also during that announcement, Marshall has decided to incorporate and sponsor a new sport, the sport of stunt. And for most of you folks that might go, what the heck is stunt? The best way I can describe it really quickly is think of competitive cheerleading and that type of thing. That will give you an idea of what stunt is. So right out of the gate, guys, great to have you here. Wish it was under better circumstances, but let's talk about the discontinuation of the swim and dive program. Russ, since you're in the middle, right immediately to my side, let me get your initial reaction with the news of swim and dive being discontinued at Marshall University.
Well, first, I wish we had the Tony Reale that could give us the stats fact check, because I am convinced, and I hope to find this after the show, that this is our second time being together as a three-man crew. But I think that it's been like 2.5 years or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But I'll prove myself hopefully correct later when I pore over all of our episodes to try to find it. Immediate reaction is, this absolutely sucks. That's my knee-jerk reaction. Ever since I first heard this, it's 6 days now that I've heard this, and I just cannot get over the 28 student athletes, the coaches, one who was just hired and moved down here. We're going to talk about the why during this. We're going to talk about the how. We're going to talk about all of that. But my reaction is, this absolutely sucks to lose that program. You know that we're kind of close to that program in several different ways. But the last time that I was over there, the last time that they had a meet at home, I actually took a photo because I just looked up and I was like, it's remarkable to me that, like, since 2021 or 2024, like the last 2020 or 2021, the last 5 to 6 years, the majority of the records for the pool and for the school are from that time period. And it's a program on the rise. There were 3 different pool records broken at that meet that I was at. And it just seems like you've brought in, like, how many times did we talk about Lunya Sheena last year, the freshman phenom, and Maddie Emmett this year, the freshman, and others too. I'm just picking out two, but newcomers too here. When you have like some that were all timers and the Canadian Olympics trials and all the stuff that we highlighted in the 5 things and around the herd, and then here we're bringing in like some of the best that we've ever seen at Marshall Swim and Dive, and Coach Ian Walsh. How often did we talk about the program that he was building and how it just kept getting better, and it was just getting ready to take off like a rocket ship, and it has now come to an end.
A grinding halt.
And one other thing that I want to say from this reaction, and yeah, this is because we have become close to this family, but there are multiple swimmers that come from overseas, and you think about that they came to America, they chose Marshall to come here, and we have even been told that we were part of that reason that they found out about like what the community of Huntington and Marshall was about, because after they were getting recruited, they said, "Hey, we found that show. We started watching it. We became involved in everything." Man, that family came over here, and while they were here for like 10 or 11 days, they went to every single sport that had an event. They donated money to those events. They went and watched. They bought tickets. They loved Huntington. They loved the community. They loved the school. And now that is not an option. They can that swimmer can stay here and get an education, scholarship, and all that stuff would remain the same, but they cannot swim like they want to do. And that is forcing not just that swimmer and all the swimmers from the international uh, flavor, that is every single one of them now have to go out and find, do I have a spot somewhere where I can continue swimming? What do I have to give up to go there? Uh, will I like that town as much? Will I like that community and that school as much? But just to go have the opportunity to swim. And I think of this a lot like consolidation in high school. Gilbert High School is no more. That's where I went to school. And several different in Mingo County all joined together to become Mingo Central Consolidated. And let's just take basketball. There were 12 roster spots for varsity basketball, and you had 4 schools that joined together, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was 48 student athletes that were playing varsity basketball, and then that drops down to 12. 36 different student athletes, because of consolidation, all of a sudden don't get to play varsity basketball like they were before. And that's how this feels, that because of the program being done away with, there's 28 student athletes here now that are going out to try to swim at a D1 school. And if no other schools have dropped the program the same year Marshall has, that's 28 students, no matter how it goes, that are not going to be swimming at a D1 college this year or next year because of that. The ripple effects of that. There's going to be somebody that maybe they have to transfer out because somebody comes in from Marshall and takes their spot. There's going to be people at Marshall that maybe they don't find a spot. And that's where this all sucks. Now we're going to talk about the why, as you said. We're going to talk about everything. But because of that emotional connection to it, this is why it sucks for me.
Yeah. It does. Jed, you're also kind of at the epicenter of this news in Huntington. I'm quite farther away, but the ripple effect reached me all the way down here, and I felt a certain type of way. What is your reaction to losing swim and dive?
Yeah, so it's I think Russ covered a lot of the points that I think I would have made. So I'm not going to rehash everything, so we can move on into the episode and everything. But Man, yeah, the initial reaction is it sucks. You see an outpouring from the community. I mean, there's a change.org uh, uh, oh, what do you call them?
Like a
The
petition.
Petition.
petition. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, petition going around. I mean, you've got, last I looked, it's probably over 20,000 now. Last I looked, it's 17,000 signatures on it. An outpouring you see on social media, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media platforms, just an outpouring from the community. And I think that's one of the things drew some of these people here. Russ and I had the privilege of actually going out to dinner with one of the families from Swim and Dive, and man, just what an awesome opportunity and an awesome conversation, and just a wonderful family. And one of the things they talked about that struck me from being from here and growing up here, you don't see it, right? The fish doesn't know it's wet type thing, because you're just kind of used to everything around you. Was they talked about how a great the community was, and everybody felt like family, and everybody was tight knit, and everybody cared, and it was just so crazy to them that just how much this community was so close and cared about the university and the sports and the athletics and everything like that. And they were very moved by it, and it was very fascinating to hear from that perspective, especially from someone not even from our country. And so just very, and so you take that, and so you draw them in, not for revenue share, for NIL, or for any other thing, but you draw people in a big part because of, hey, you're now family, you're now one of us. We're going to take care of you. We're going to love on you. We're going to cheer you on. And then now, see ya. And that I think that stings worse. And I know it's not meant that way. I understand that, when you're running, and we'll dig into this deeper, later on in the episode, but that's how it feels. And so that's why you're seeing those gut reactions. I've seen the gut reactions on social media of, they're hurt. And so some are lashing out a little bit, being hurt. And it's just, at the end of the day, we feel really, really bad, as a community for these student athletes who committed their time and effort and their talents to our university, to now having to figure out something else. Some of them probably to never return to this area because of and why would they at that point? So that's the gut reaction, right? And we, again, like to Russ's point, to your point, we'll talk about the why, but that's the gut reaction. Is it sucks. I think there are. I think I understand some of the reasonings. We'll talk about those. Some things maybe we don't understand or maybe don't agree with, but the gut reaction is I'm with Russ, man. It sucks. It sucks.
I think where I'm at with it, obviously that word is just sums it up really well. It does suck, but there's a couple of different levels that this hits for me, because we talk so much about the atmosphere that we build at our university, and I say, how many times have you guys heard me say every school in the country will pitch family, but at Marshall we absolutely deliver it, right? And I haven't heard anybody say that anything to the contrary. And when you hear stuff like this, when decisions like this get made, man, it kind of gives you a little bit of a gut punch, because you're like, hey, hold on a minute, like, how did this happen so quickly? And I realize you can't just go, you know what, we're going to keep the program for the next 4 years. We're just not going to recruit anybody. So you can't do that. You know what I mean? You can't just let everybody age out so you get attrition by graduation, because you're funding at that point, what, a 3 years from now, a swim and dive program that might have like 4 or 5 people in it. You can't do that. But I'm telling you, man, I was shocked. First thing I was shocked. And then immediately I felt deep empathy for the student athletes, their families that believed in what Marshall was. I mean, let's face it, you can jump in any pool and get wet, right? So it's not about the pool. It's about the culture that was built around this university and this athletic department and fan base. And, and it just felt like the rug got pulled out from under really quickly. And I understand some of the big feelings that are coming out, because, hey man, there's not a stunt alumni at all at Marshall, but there was a whole bevy of alumni from Swim and Dive, and they're like, "Hey, this is our program. What are you doing here?" So I understand it. On one hand, there's the fan side of me that is equally as angry that we're just losing a program and the way that it happened so swiftly. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying the way it went down, and it's conference championship week, and the timing just seems like it's bad. And they've explained that a little bit as to why now and why not later. And I get it, but and then there's the other side of me that tries to see things like from a financial perspective, and knowing what we know about the herd and what they want to do and where they want to be. And I understand the reasoning that was laid out. It doesn't mean I like it, but I understand it. But anytime we lose a sport that we've had for a while, that we became fans of, we became big fans of Swim and Dive over the course of the creation of our podcast. And we really saw an uptick in performance when Coach Ian Walsh was hired. And Russ alluded to that. Records going down left and right, all-time records, program records, pool records, whatever records. And they even indicated that in the statement that was released. This had nothing to do with performance, which again is another gut punch, because you're like, I could understand it if we couldn't compete at all, but they were doing really, really well. And academically, they were doing really well, leading the country in GPA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you start to rack up more reasons why not than to why. But I'm with you guys. It just sucks. Jed, you talked about the dinner that you guys went out. Y'all FaceTimed me, and I had an opportunity to go around the table and talk to the entire family and meet the entire family. And that was so freaking cool, man.
Even though in person you got to talk to Brian the Libra.
But I mean, it was just such a cool moment. And we've hosted those girls at our tailgates, and it's, of course our tailgates are open to everybody, but it's really cool when we get to, rub shoulders with our athletes, and they're like, "Man, this is really cool. You guys do this is awesome. Thank you." And, it's like, we're put in a place where we can give back, and this is how we choose to give back. I hate to lose them. The first thing I did today after I got off work, I was listening to some synopses of the, from like Keith Morehouse I saw a clip of what Keith had to say, and I was listening to some of those things, and I started Googling what schools in Florida have Swim and Dive, so that maybe one of our athletes would end up in Florida, and I could go be a Swim and Dive fan some point and go still support them wearing a herd hat at that meet. And the only one that I could find around me that supports Swim and Dive is the University of Florida, which is odd to me that they all don't support Swim and Dive. You would think that'd be a thing. But, I was like, man, if USF has it, that'll be awesome. That's right down the road. I can go check it out. But anyway, I'm with you guys. I think we should move into the reasons that were given of why this decision came down the pipeline, and talk about each one of those individually. You guys will have perspectives that I probably won't have. I will have some that you probably won't have, and we just need to air those and for people to hear, and also give people some information as to why, in case they don't know, these reasons. Brad Smith issued a statement today. It's on social media. It's very easy to find. And three main things were talked about. And it was the facilities, the Title IX compliance, and budgetary reasons. So we'll start with facilities, because you guys have seen them much more often than I have, and probably most, if we're being honest, of the herd fan base has seen. They know we have an natatorium. They've probably not been inside of it for a myriad of reasons, one of which is it's hard as hell to find. But we need to talk about the facilities, the age, what the capital investment would be to maintain this facility, bring it to the next level, to continue competing at a high level. So let's start there.
And I'll tell you a couple of things that I watched the entire part that was not an executive session, and I listened to everything that Brad Smith and Gerald Harrison talked about, but I also listened to Gerald Harrison on the drive with Paul Swan, where he answered some of these specific questions. It's not the pool itself. The number one thing that I want to pass along from being on the Paul Swan show, Gerald Harrison said, campus rec and the university maintain the pool. The pool is going to remain open because, KD, you know very well of classes that are in there. You know, the athletic department and the swim and dive program was using the pool, but they were not responsible for the pool itself. And that will stay open for the classes, but also for the high schools around here in the community that uses it. There's a club team at Marshall. There's a U.S. national team that uses it, and 4 local high schools that use it, plus meets that go on. So that's the number one thing. He said the pool itself is not in like disrepair, but what it is everything else around it. Locker rooms with plumbing issues and HVAC issues and just being severely outdated and not modern. And it's not just like, well, let's go change out a toilet or something, or let's fix a pipe. It's that it needs to drastically be overhauled and remodeled just to come up to a D1 standard. And that's what he was saying. So the facilities themselves has nothing really to do with the pool, but it's the area around the pool and the changing rooms, the dry room, all the different stuff that you have that goes into a D1 facility. Think about if go back 4 years and someone said, well, you could actually play on the field at the Y for baseball up on Route 2. You know, the field itself wasn't an issue. It wasn't like there was a car parked in center field. It wasn't like, you know, the fence was falling down or they didn't have a fence and they just had to say, you know, if you hit it over the moose, you get a home run, you know, things like that. It was what was around it. You know, there was nothing else there that said this is a D1 facility. So I'm trying to picture it in that way, that, you know, the locker rooms, the dry room, the, you know, for the home team and the visiting team, it was just in drastic disrepair. It was said, and I think it was Brad Smith said, that when he was in school here at Marshall, the Nat was built, and that he said that was 1981. So you're looking at 45 years, and it's basically 45 years of nothing has been really done for those locker rooms and things like that since. Now, I'm sure things have been done. I'm sure they painted it, but you and I have gone through Gullickson Hall quite a bit. And before they did a lot of that work to the hallways leading over to the Henderson Center and stuff like that, it was about as dated and aged, and like, I can't believe that we have facilities in here. They've had things happen like the Skaggs practice facility for basketball, redone the hallways and things like that. But the locker rooms and everything, I don't think have been really upgraded to where they need to be a D1 facility.
Well, you know, I had a class in the pool when I was an undergrad, and you're talking right around the turn of the century there when I had that. And dude, those locker rooms looked every bit of from the 80s, you know, so they hadn't been touched in 20 some years at that point. I feel pretty confident about it. And if they had been updated in the last 20 some years, then it has been minimal, you know. I mean, maybe just nicer lockers, that type of thing. But you know, you didn't get the locker room being gutted like we saw with the football team, with both basketball teams. And you know, like there hasn't been a massive capital investment in that program. And when I saw the numbers for what it costs to sponsor that, I was kind of shocked that it was that big. So that's part of this, and we'll get into that. But that was a reason where I can say, all right, I can understand, but I still don't like it. That kind of thing.
Quick sidebar that you mentioned there about football locker rooms or football weight rooms and things like that, that a lot of that came about.
That was private money.
From an alumnus or a couple of alumnuses of that sport that said, let's do this and let's put our own money in. It wasn't something that came from the athletic department budget or the big green budget. They were fortunate to do that because several alumni stepped up. And let's face it, we don't have alumni of the swim and dive that have been in the equivalent of the NFL for 10 years, you know, and things like that, to where they could just say, hey, let's drop 15 million and upgrade this facility to where it needs to be. I mean, it's a large ask for anybody to do, and not everybody has the availability to do that.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry, Jed. I'll get you in here. I didn't mean to
No,
give the
you're good.
indicate. I did not mean to give the indication that we had
You
prioritized
didn't.
football, because
You
most
didn't.
fans know that it's the Vinnie Curry
Yeah.
locker room,
Right.
and that football alumni had the opportunity to sponsor a locker so that
Right.
their name is also on a
Yeah.
locker. So it was very much done, the vast majority, if not almost all, by private funds and a fundraising effort. Now, Jed, please give me your thoughts.
No, you're good. Yeah, it's I don't want to jump in and be too harsh here, but also want to wait my turn. No, there's a couple of things, and this will kind of my thoughts kind of bleed over into the financial side. I don't want to push too far over that side, but we're already kind of talking about that.
We're in it.
So I think you made a really, really great point about, when you have guys in the NFL and they're making NFL money, they can donate and things of that nature. One thing that you have to keep in mind too, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but I'm trying to play a little bit because I'm trying to understand, because I can understand what the administration and everybody's dealing with is, you had people, I mean, you're 4, 5, 6, 7 people removed from, who made decisions 45 years ago, when these facilities were built, and now you've got people that are in there for, I'm going to call it terms, right? So, if you've got somebody in there for 4 years or 5 years, and, you're not making these things priority, and you're letting them sit, you're painting a locker room when you can or something like that, then all of a sudden it becomes oh crap, now we got to do something. And unfortunately, sometimes then it's too late. So, guys like Brad Smith and Gerald Harrison, I mean, I don't envy Gerald Harrison at all. I mean, none of this is his fault, as far as the things that led up to this. And I'm not going to blame past administrations and say, it's your fault. But it's kind of the nature of the beast when you're running an entity as large as Marshall University, that when you build facilities, sometimes you don't think, how is this going to affect the university as a whole 50 years from now? And that's something that Brad Smith said in that meeting when he was given his presentation during the Board of Governors meeting and he talked about, the role is sustainability for the university, right? Like his ultimate purpose as president of the university is make sure that the university is there 200 years from now. And I've had discussions with other people, and I'm going to go off on a little rabbit trail and I'll come right back, is that, I've had people say, well, Brad Smith's got so much money. Why is he not, doing NIL? And why isn't he doing this? And why is it? Well, it's like, because, you look at a guy like, Mark Klein, who passes away, a big donor, and then all that money disappears.
Chris Klein.
Chris, I'm sorry, not Mark. Yeah, you're right. Chris Klein passes away. And and if you're relying on a bunch of money from a single donor and that person, unfortunately passes, and you lose that stream of income, you've not built something sustainable. And so I see that from his perspective is you've got to build something that can be sustainable over time itself, regardless of any one or a single individual. So I'm going to come back from my rabbit trail and say that, one of the things that the university is working towards, and I think with this group, is how do we sustain our facilities? How do we sustain our programs? And how can we do this over time instead of getting in these situations where maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like it was like oh crap, we really need to take care of this facility and make some major renovations to be compliant and bring it up to Division 1 standards. And we just can't, not without some major lift and things of that. Is that you kind of see where I'm going with that? Is you've got to build that over, and I don't think it was necessarily done over time. Not because
it certainly wasn't prioritized over the last 5 decades.
Right. Yes, exactly. And so but it needs to be something that moving forward, I would expect that this is going to happen moving forward. So it's unfortunate that it's fallen in Gerald's lap, 6 months into the job.
Yeah. A point about Brad Smith, and Jed, you didn't say this, but I'm commenting on people that would say, well, why don't Brad do this? Go over and look at the Brad Smith Alumni Foundation building.
Right.
that is possible from his donations. Go down on 4th Avenue, which was the first building built for the IDEA. Impossible doesn't exist anymore. Corridor for the Brad Smith business incubator. And go to the article that was from less than 6 months ago, I think, where Brad and Elise donated $50 million
$50
to the
million.
university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, you can't just say, and you didn't say this, but you can't just say, hey, you've got money, give it to us. Well, the guy already is, and he's doing probably the best job that we've ever seen from any president that's ever been at Marshall, and he also cares a lot about athletics too. And, I have the utmost respect for him and what he's done. And I think anyone you talk to does as well. But for the people that are saying, well, why don't you just throw that in? Brad even said it's not even just a dollar figure for this year. It takes $16 million to do a 5% draw or pull from there to endow that to get to the $800,000. To get to $800,000, 819 was actually the dollar figure for the budget. It takes $16 million, so you know that you can pull 5% in perpetuity. If you're getting 5% return on investment, that fund will always be there, that it can fund you pulling from that, just to endow it so it never goes away. Otherwise, you have to say, well, it's $800,000 every year. How are we going to do it? You can raise the money and get it for another year. That is the budget. That doesn't change the facility that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't upgrade that. So you need both of those things to upgrade the facility to the standards that you should have for a D1 facility, and try to fund it. And that's in this year's budget. What happens when cost of living increases and stuff like that? I know we're not still at the same budget that we were 10 years ago for all of athletics or for each individual sport.
Mm-hmm.
Coaches get incremental raises. Athletes may get more. It's we have 28 on the roster. I think they said the max was 30. So there's two more that you could have even brought on, which would have upped that budget and increased it. But travel is going to be more expensive over the years. That's an $819,000 budget this year. It doesn't fix it just to raise $819,000, because then you just hope to limp through one more year.
Yeah, you just kick the can down the road one more
Yeah.
year. But we can't move off of this topic and into the next topic without me playing devil's advocate a little bit, because you're talking about not having the money to outfit and raise your natatorium up to a Division I standard, but you don't have a stunt team, locker rooms built and an infrastructure for that either. So that stuff's gonna have to come from somewhere. There may be existing. I understand there. I'm not talking about new construction buildings, right?
Right.
But there's rooms somewhere that they're.
Yeah.
But that shit ain't free. You're still
not.
there's still gonna be renovation costs that are involved in that. So I'm not trying to throw stones. I'm just saying that's not something that you can just get away with saying, well, we can't afford to bring it up to D1 standards, knowing full well you're going to have to transform some other space to a D1 standard.
Gerald highlighted that a little bit on when he was on with Paul. And he said that a lot of the athletes that will be on stunt will come from the club. He's figuring come from the club cheerleading program. That they will already be here. They already do have some of the stuff involved that they have to have for cheerleading, will also be there for stunt. It will not be 100% funded, ready to go. But he threw out the number that it's 819 right now for 28 for the swimming, to have 28 student athletes on there. And I think the number for stunt, if they get all the way up to 65, they have it at $335,000.
Yeah.
So it's nearly $500,000 difference. And they do already have like where the cheerleaders use right now, that's where they're going to be using for stunt. There's a little bit that will be needed, uniforms, obviously, or attire, or whatever you want to say. But also, they'll need more mats, and they'll need more crash pads and everything that they'll need that comes along with that. Coaches have to be hired for that specifically. There is going to be a budget of it, but they moved from 819 down to 335. And in these scenarios, going from 28 female student athletes to 65 student athletes. That's what the thing was from Brad and from Gerald in the different parts that I listened to. That's what they were highlighting.
So that's a perfect segue into the budgetary reasoning behind this cut. Was it costs $800 and some $1,000 to operate the swim and dive program for up to 30 athletes, and 300, let's just call it 350. It's not that high, but let's call it 350 to keep the numbers round. It's $350,000 of projected budget to scholarship up to 65 athletes. So if you do the math, you're at any given year, give or take, that's a plus 35 roster spots across the entire athletic department that generates opportunities for more women athletes. And that's another thing that's as part of the Title IX compliance. But just talking about budgetary, this is really where my part of the, I understand it. It makes sense to me on this hand, but on this hand, it sucks because we're losing a sport that we were doing really well in, both academically and athletically, that we have a history in, and we're moving to a sport that we have no history in, and who knows how we were, will we be competitive or will we not? Like all of these question marks. But the budgetary, the dollars and cents do make sense to the brain that's in my skull. I understand the need to and the desire to save $500,000 a year annually when you're trying to find ways to become more efficient and more streamlined and be able to afford more things on this with the same money. Hell, we do that in our own homes every day. So let's talk about budgets. Jed, what's your thoughts on the move and using the variable of budget as a reason?
I get it. I'm with you in my brain. I was trying to do some quick research. I didn't get the numbers that I wanted, or the information I was looking for, but the numbers make sense. So if we're going to look at a purely fiscal approach, I think people get it that it makes sense. Stunt, to me, unless I'm completely wrong, I've not been involved in stunt. I know I've got the build for it, but I've never been involved for it. But so I may be talking out of my rear here, but it's low upfront cost, right? If you can find a facility, repurpose one, like Russ mentioned, if you can repurpose a facility, you need mats and certain things. I did a little bit of Googling. I did look up a YouTube video where I guess it's like they do 4 quarters of play. Like you're like, there's like 4 different things. It's almost like 4 quarters of different types of competition, and you're graded on it and whatnot. But if it looks to me that it's, like you mentioned, it's kind of in that cheerleading, type realm where, as long as you have mats, safety gear, the uniforms, things of that nature, it's a very low upfront cost to get started. It's a low cost to maintain. I assume a big chunk of that 300,000 is probably paying coaches and things of that nature. A chunk of that's going to be salaries and stuff like that. So it's very low cost. So I get it. It also, I think a lot of people feel it's almost though that it's a little bit of a slight as well, right? Like, let's just go with what's cheap. I'm not saying that's what it is. I also see the opportunity around it. If you can provide scholarships and opportunity to up to 65 women for low cost to the university and give them a good opportunity for that, I get that as well. I don't know, guys. I'm on the fence. I understand it. I mean, it makes sense, especially when you're looking at budgets and sustainability and things of that nature. I get it. But with my feelings, though, I'm a bit on the fence, to be completely honest, just because it does almost feel like a little bit of a slight that, hey, let's do what's cheap, even though I don't think that's the motivation. I don't want to say that's the motivation. I don't think that is. It does have a little bit of a little bit of a sting there, but I get it. It makes sense.
I think it makes it easier to sell because you can say, well, we're doing it for less, but we're providing more opportunity. So
Yeah,
you're hoping that
get that.
that spin, I don't even want to call it a spin. You're hoping that that facet of this whole thing really helps people to look past, well, we're going to save money by doing this. Because if twice as many twice as many women can be on scholarship, well, that makes it a little easier to swallow. You're like, oh, okay, well, super freaking sucks, but twice as many women can now be on scholarship. We're going to try something new, but all right, Russ, I know you're very analytical. I mean, it's been in your history as long as I've known you. So I know the dollars and cents make sense to you. And I know that you say, yes, if we're only looking at this facet, great move because of what all the things we've said. But, give me a few minutes on the budget side of things for you.
Yeah, so I feel like we can't talk about budget without talking about the absolute monster that has been created by the NCAA or the lack of their authority to do so. That I feel like that this is a direct result from that.
Mm,
Gerald Harrison did not come in here with the intentions of saying, "Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to slash, swim, and dive." You
yeah.
know,
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that that was on his agenda from day one. Some people may feel that way, and I just a very quick aside. He said this on Paul's show. Um, he had two different student athletes at a different university that passed away in I think back to back years from a car wreck in each one of them, and he had to deal with that about going and talking to the family and things like that. And he said, by far, I can't compare to that. That is by far the hardest thing I've ever done professionally that I've had to do. Outside of that, he said this situation was the hardest thing that he had to do. And that kind of tells you, this wasn't something that he just came in and said, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. Everything I know it's a side little tangent, but I will bring it back like Jed did earlier. Everything that he's done in the 6 months plus that he's been here, he's gotten near unanimous praise from everybody about the transparency of the way that he's communicated. And people have been able to send in suggestions, and then all of a sudden, we already see them, things that they've sent in. And he was like, yeah, we can do that because we can do that right now. Why aren't we doing that? Why don't we have more things for banners put up for previous teams to celebrate them? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? So he's been praised on how he's handled just about everything. And this was a decision that there was not going to be a good outcome from, you know. And I'm not taking up for him, defending him or whatever. I'm just saying that if I were in that same situation, that it made the most sense in the world if it did. It would still suck for me to have to give that news over to somebody. So now to tie it back into budget, I feel like their hands were forced in a lot of ways because of what has gone on with your football as the revenue driver. And that it has basically been we have to spend more money on football. We have to spend more money on basketball. And we have to keep doing this. And it's not just Marshall, but every single D1 university is having to do this. And what suffers? It's the non revenue sports. And we hate that term. You and I hate using that term. But it is. It's the things that suffer because everything else budgets have continued to balloon and balloon and balloon. But what didn't balloon was taking care of this program, Swim and Dive, for years. And that's way, way before Gerald Harrison interviewed at Marshall. That this stuff needed to be done if our facilities are that far behind, 45 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and not a significant enough update. This isn't a problem that creeped up in November. This isn't a problem that creeped up in January. He even said we didn't want to have a situation where the team was without a diving coach. Coach Ian Walsh says, hey, I'm a swim coach. I don't know enough about dive to be a D1 dive coach. I need someone there. They made a change, but the process took so long that it was only 3 weeks ago, going on to 4 weeks now, that Coach Tom Wynn was brought in. And 3 weeks after he was brought here, they canceled the program.
Yeah.
But Gerald Harrison said it would not be something that we wanted to do and say, well, let's just leave them without a dive coach for the rest of this season and everything because we're going to get rid of it. He said even this was on Paul's show, at the time that Coach Wynn was hired, the decision had not been fully made and formed yet that they were going to be getting rid of swim and dive. It was looking likely, but it had not been determined. So now getting back on this budget and everything, $819,000. You've got the travel and everything. There's no other team in our conference, even though there are teams like JMU is in our conference. The conference doesn't sponsor it. So there's not an incentive to say, hey, well, we've got travel partners here and there. You've got to go off somewhere to have these meets. We went to the Missouri Valley Conference, I think it was last year for 1 year.
Yeah.
And so you've got that. You've got the travel involved in this and all that. And the budget, just the finances are not there. And I really wish that this would have been more of a spectator sport in a couple of reasons. One, I begged people to go, that you would have a great time, that it's great for the family. My son, we haven't even told him yet, but he is looking forward to going back and watching the diving is the number one thing that he likes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you got a kid that loves his tablet as much as any other kid in the world, and it will take him from his tablet and he will be involved in watching the divers, that's saying something. So I really wish this was a spectator sport that you could do, not only get more people to go, but also say, hey, I like it enough that I will go and spend $5, or I'll go and I'll spend $2, and that they would have had a little bit more revenue coming in and things like that. But it's an expensive sport, even when you don't get into the upkeep of the pool. Now, if they had the maintenance of the pool itself, it'd be a lot more. But let's talk about what drives that budget up. It's not just travel. It's not just the coaches. It's not the scholarships. You have to have the electronic timing and things like that, and the cameras in place and things. There's a lot of software and hardware that has to be put in.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have that with stunt. You're not going to have that in some of the other things. But those are some of the hidden costs that people just don't realize.
Yeah, that didn't occur to me. I was wondering where the hell all the money was. Where did you need it? And now when you say things like timers and cameras, and you think, oh yeah, well hell, of course
there's a lot of judges, and I mean you have to be specifically trained in that. It's not you're getting a youth league football coach to come over and referee.
Right.
It's
It's pretty specialized disciplines, man. It takes specialized training.
Think about watching the Olympics, which are going on right now, and you watch swimming, anytime they have that. And they have, obviously, in the Olympics, a lot more high-tech technology than we have. But they have the camera for the photo finish right there, but they get it down to the millisecond of when that finger touches the wall and everything. You have to have that in a D1 swimming facility, and we do. But that stuff costs money, and it's not a one-time purchase that you get and it lasts for 10 years. Jed over here in ignite.link knows how technology fails all the time, and that's why ignite.link and Layer 1 are there for when it does. And what happens when you're in the middle of a meet and it happens? There's a lot that goes into things like that have to be timed, and you have to be down to the photo finish.
Yeah. So let's spend the last 10 minutes. Let's try to wrap this one up here within the next 10 minutes and talk about the third component of this reasoning, which is Title IX compliance. And this is where I think we need to bring people to give them a better understanding of what are you talking about compliance? Because I thought it was you need the same number of sports, right? We need X amount of sports for men, and you got to have X amount of sports for women, and you're in compliance. Well, that's not what it means. And we were educated a little bit on this as this story was unfolding, because these were nuances of Title IX that we didn't know about necessarily. Um, it has more to do with the population of your school and how it's broken down. So you think about your overall athletic department, and then you think about all the sports that are involved within the entire department and how many roster spots are across the entire department. Those need to really closely align with your population breakdown at your university. And Russ has the numbers or kind of in front of him, and he can break them down and tell you where we were. But you think about it like that, not as a gross number of sports for men and a gross number of sports for women. Because look, football's got 100 and some spots on it, right?
105.
There's no women's sport that has 105 spots on it. And as a matter of fact, it would probably encompass a whole hell of a lot of the women's sports to get to 105. And that's not even talking about baseball team and the basketball team and, the men's track team and all the other teams that we have. So think about it like that. If your school, let's keep the numbers round. If your school has a breakdown of 60% women that go to your school and 40% men that go to your school, that's kind of what the roster spots need to look like across your athletic department. So, really quickly, since you're going to have the numbers and you're probably going to close out the episode, Jed, talk about Title IX and what you learned about it through this and using it. I mean, you can't say it's a negative in it. This is a positive selling point for this decision. So just talk about Title IX in general and your reaction to that aspect.
Yeah, I think Title IX, when it originally came out, and I'm not going to pretend to know everything about it because I don't know much about it at all, other than what the compliance side is, and I get the purpose behind it, and I 100% agree with it. I was actually talking about with some people earlier today, and over the course of talking about this, it's been a big hot topic of conversation with people I know and friends of mine and things of that nature. I've got 3 girls. I'm girl dad. I don't have any boys in the house other than myself, and so what I see with my girls and with women and with sports and athletic opportunities. One of the things that Title IX accomplishes, and I think it serves a very, very great purpose, is to make sure that women, in higher education, have those athletic opportunities the same as the men do. And so on the, I'm seeing it from, right now from the high school side. Title IX doesn't affect on the high school side. I don't think, maybe it does, but having those opportunities for my girls to have opportunities to participate in sports and athletics, and that's the key to me. The key behind it is opportunity, right? That they have the opportunity to do that. So the math, the formulas, I can't disagree with it. I don't know enough about it, but Marshall needs to be in compliant with this, and if it's tied to the enrollment, then they need to be able to, they got to have that proportionality. And we see this not just in Marshall, but we discussed this a little bit before the show, just across the nation. A lot more women are going to college than men are. And so that proportionality actually pushes it more, more than 50%, I would argue, at a lot of universities have women enrollment. And so because that enrollment is going up for women and more women are going to college than men are, Marshall as a university, to stay compliant, needs to have those roster spots for women and have sports that they can sponsor that have that. And so stunt, obviously, that was a big argument, was that would give more opportunity for these women, for women to participate in collegiate sports. So for that side of things, I'm for that. And I agree with, the more opportunities for women, the better. And for, I'm all for fair, for fairness here. And I think that's the spirit of Title IX and what his intention is for. And so Marshall working to build and bring up those roster spots for women, that's a good thing. And I'm for that. And if we can do that in a way that is cost effective and self-sustaining, I'm all for that. So I get it. I didn't know. I was with you, KD. I thought it was, you had to sponsor, if you have football over here, you need to sponsor softball over here, right? And it's got to be a 1-to-1 ratio. I didn't realize that roster spots and the proportionality to your enrollment was a factor in that. That was just out of my ignorance. I didn't know that. And so this makes sense. Again, I'm not saying I fully agree and, hey, drink the Kool-Aid per se. It's but I think that the university has to have a fiscal responsibility, to maintain. Marshall's operating at a deficit. Brad Smith talked about that during the Board of Governors meeting. Working to get break even into next year. So we are operating at a deficit, but we're also responsible to increase the number of roster spots that we have as well. And so stunt allows for more opportunity for more women to be involved at the collegiate level. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, and it's worthy to sacrifice one over the other, but giving women and student athletes more opportunity and more roster spots is a net positive than it is a negative, right? And I think, Russ, I think you talked about that a little bit earlier in the show that, we're now providing more opportunity to student athletes. So it doesn't take away the suckiness side of it,
It does
and
not.
the terribleness side of it. And if there was a way to sustain swim and dive and add stunt, if there was a way to do that, why not? How can we? Can we figure something out? And I just, I'm not going to attribute malice because I don't think there was any malice in the decisions that were made. I think that the decisions that were made were net positive, adds more spots, adds more scholarship, adds more opportunity for student athletes, while addressing budgetary and facilities issues. So, like I said, I don't attribute malice to Gerald or to Brad or to the Board of Governors or to anybody that was involved in this decision-making process. I think some things were done, I wouldn't say irresponsibly, but things, the way the communication was handled and things of that nature. But I get it and I understand it. I don't necessarily like it, but it does at the end of the day provide additional opportunity for more student athletes that wasn't there before.
Yeah. And before Russ gives the final rundown of the numbers here, let's say two things that I think we can all three agree on right now. Number one, this is not a Marshall exclusive problem. Universities across the country are out of Title IX compliance. So you can't sit there as a herd fan and go, what the hell are we doing? We just don't care. That's not that at all. As a matter of fact, I think even though this is a really hard decision, part of me thinks, well, this is kind of them showing that they do care because they're trying to get closer to that number to where they need to be. And you said it, you nailed it. If there was a way to do it, they would have just added another sport. They would have just added stunt and taken on the additional, $300 and some $1,000 and added that to the annual budget and added 65 roster spots and not cut 30. But that's not the world that we currently live in and we operate in. So you can see where all these things are intertwined. It's budgetary, it's Title IX compliance, facilities, all these things are intertwined. So we can all agree this is not a Marshall exclusive problem. And we can also agree that if they could have just come into compliance without making a cut, they would have. Now, Russ, tie this all together with where Marshall was and where this gets them to, and we'll close this out.
Yeah, and I hope that my battery doesn't die doing back-to-back episodes, but I'll try to run through this. These numbers are rounded, but enrollment for undergrads is roughly 57% female and 43% male at Marshall. However, we have 60% opportunities for athletics for men to 40% Marshall, and that gap has been at 105 individual opportunities. I just want to say that doing the quick math, if you say that 105 scholarships for football, if that were 43%, you need to have 244 plus. So you got to round that up. You can't have like 244 doesn't get it done. It's 244.19 or whatever. You got to have a 245th person there. So you have to have 245 female athletes just to keep the proportionality for having football. And that's across the country, which, by the way, you're right. It was estimated that 93% of Division One or all Division One, two, three, whatever, anyone that has sports, 93% are out of compliance when looking at the proportionality and things like that. That was from the 2021-2022 season that was provided. But so then you have to sit here and say, okay, for having football, if you got to have 245 more, so everything that you add on the men's side, you have to have equal to that plus 245. So if you have basketball and the roster is 15, then you've got to have 260 in female sports. And you just keep adding everything. Baseball, you got to have this and that. Title IX, by the way, too, I don't know the exact thing and the exact number. It's either 3 sports, 4 sports, but it's like if you offer that on the male side, you have to have the equivalent of that on the female side. And you can't say, well, we've got the baseball stadium here and it's got a locker room and everything, but we don't want to have a locker room for the softball team. So you have to do equivalent things like that. But yeah, we're out of compliance, but so is just about everybody else. It sucks, but what happens if you bust your butt to do everything that's in compliance and then the female enrollment goes up by another 5% over the next year? Then you have to say, well, we have to add more things. So I think being 100% in compliant, you can do everything that you want to do and you can still fall short, on any given year. And I understand that it's on a rolling 5 or it's on a rolling whatever, and I'm about to lose my battery here. So I just want to close my part in case I get kicked off here by saying I went back and looked at that photo from the last meet, and we have 22 different events at Marshall in swim and dive. And the leaderboard, 9 of those 22, the school record came from 2020 or on, closer. 8 of those 9 were from 24 or 25. The Marshall Swim and Dive program was originally tried back in 1974. It lasted 1 season, and it didn't get brought back until 2002. So from 2002 to 2020, almost everything was 2015 and newer. But Ian Walsh, for however long he's been there, you're looking at 24, 25, and pool records were broken this year. It looks like it was just going to keep going on and on. So as much as I'm saying, yeah, some numbers make sense and things like that, I'm still saying this sucks. It sucks for these student athletes. It sucks for their families, and it sucks for the coaches. It sucks for the fans. It sucks for people that are sons and daughters of Marshall. It sucks for the alumni. It sucks for us. Everybody thinks that it sucks. And I'm glad, and so was Brad Smith. He commented on he's glad that everybody reached out to him or he saw on social media. And what he saw was people wanting to react because they have a passion for swim and dive at Marshall and Marshall University and Marshall University athletics. And that's where I want to end this, is that everybody did this out of love for not wanting that to go away. The reality is it looks like it's going away, and there's nothing that can be done to save it.
No, not in the short term, and not without a massive increase in athletic budget. It does not look like swim and dive will make a return anytime soon. And some people might say, well, then why don't you just start cutting some men's sports, and then you will bring that overall number down and you might be able to save it. Well, then you run into the problem of needing to maintain a minimum number of sponsored sports to be a Division I athletic department. And that number is 14, by the way. So that means either 7 men's sports and 7 women's sports, or you can get away with sponsoring 6 men's sports and 8 women's sports. So Who knows if this will be over or not? We don't know.
You've got the Sun Belt requirement too to be in that conference. You have to sponsor a certain amount of sports. So
Right. So you
anyway,
can't just go start cutting the men's side of the athletic department, because then you're out of compliance somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else.
yeah.
It's a very fluid situation, and I don't know if it'll be the last move that gets made, but definitely the first move that got made was the discontinuation of swim and dive. We here at the Thundercast officially think it absolutely sucks to see swim and dive go away. Of course, we will support a stunt team when they inevitably get rolled out and begin competition. But for right now, I'm going to allow myself to hurt with our swim and dive athletes and our swim and dive families and our swim and dive coaches and our swim and dive alumni, because there's not a stunt team right now, and there is a swim and dive team, and they've just been told they don't have a place at Marshall anymore. So I'm going to be with them for a little bit, because I'm a guy in front of a mic and I can say it sucks. And I know they all think it sucks. So I'm just going to say it freaking sucks. Jed, got any final words?
No, I just honestly, and one thing I can say to the coaches, to the student athletes, to the swim and dive athletes, to those young women, to those alumni, for me, I know you guys are going to say the same thing. Just thank you. Thank you all for everything that you've done for the university, for your teammates, for your family. I think we're still your family, even though you're unfortunately going to have to go make some new families, or make a new family somewhere else, and that sucks because you were promised something here that is not going to be delivered on for you here, and so that's a broken promise to you when you were recruited. But I know for me, I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for the university and for your team, for Herd Nation as a whole. Just want to say thank you, and I'm sorry, and man, it sucks.
Yeah. Rush, got nothing else? Take us out of here.
Yeah, whether you see us
Oh, he lost it. Hey,
So
well,
close.
he got, I don't want to say it, but anyway, we'll cut him out so it looks a little better. There we go. I guess I'll say also, but I'll take us out of here, but I'll say, yes, even though it doesn't feel good right now, you will always be daughters of Marshall. You will always be welcome in Huntington, West Virginia, and you will always be welcome wherever the Thundercast is. Best of luck to all of those athletes that are entering the transfer portal. May you find a place where you can compete and compete at a high level. To all of our families that bought in and listened to our show, and we helped you make the decision to come to Huntington. I'm sorry that it worked out the way it did, but we still love you guys. Russ, Jed, we still love you guys. And as your journey takes another chapter, just know that we'll be missing you, and we wish you all the best of luck that you can possibly have. So with that, whether you see us around the Jack, whether you see us around the Joan, or whether you see us at the Cam, no matter where you see us, we're going to be saying, go Herd. We'll see you next week. Later.